In this lesson, we're going to talk about building up mentors in your church. And this is all about building a discipleship infrastructure so that you really have what it takes to have a discipleship culture in your church. So we've talked about building up parents. Parents are really important because the family is the most basic group in church. And then we talked also about small groups, and small groups are the organizational key for an infrastructure of discipleship in your church. Well, the last thing then is mentors, because mentors, it turns out, I want to make sure you know what we mean by mentors. A mentor is just someone who can go, one-on-one or one-on-two or three. So if a small group might have 10 or 12 people, a mentoring group might only have one or two other people in the group, maybe three other people in the group. And mentoring is really important because mentors provide the personal touch needed for a discipleship culture. A mentor is that person who can go deeper, who can get really personal with someone. Someone might, for example, come to church and they hear a sermon, they think, man, that was really good. That I really needed to hear that. I want to talk about it in small group. And they go to small group and that was really good. But really for most people to really get to that to that place where they can apply it, they need a mentor where they're not just talking about it, they're not just hearing about it in church or talking about it in a group of a dozen people, but they really have someone that they go one-on-one with or one-on-two with, and really have someone that has them in mind and can share the right truth at the right time with them. Mentoring is just the word that we use for discipling. A mentor is just a discipler, but we like to use the word mentor because we like the sense that it brings of really helping someone in life. When you think about discipleship, you might just think that that's talking about theology. I know that's not what Jesus meant by it, but we can get that idea. Mentoring, real discipleship biblical mentoring is about helping someone in faith and in life. Helping someone just connect all the dots. And that takes time. And that takes listening. And that takes helping. And that takes really being committed to someone and walking with them. And that's what a mentor is all about. Now, mentoring can be used in almost every ministry at your church. Don't think that mentoring is just some program, you go find a mentor. Mentoring can affect every ministry at church. So, for example, you can have marriage mentors. Marriage mentors are some of the easiest to really get started. You could train up 2 or 3 or 4 couples to be marriage mentors and then start connecting them with couples in need. It'll change your church. Use our marriage mentor training for that. Or maybe youth mentors in your youth group. If you want to really revolutionize your youth group, start training up mentors in your youth ministry where these youth leaders, college kids or maybe even some of the older high school kids can be mentors. Because remember, what we teach in Foundations Truth number 3 is that we mature, we grow by helping others. So we're talking really about mentoring, that if a person could come to faith and then eventually become a mentor, they're going to grow in their faith, leaps and bounds. Maybe you've experienced that. So create opportunities for that in every ministry in your church. Marriage, youth, worship ministry can have mentors. You can structure your worship ministry to say not just, hey, lead songs on Sunday morning, but tell your worship leaders, take your worship leaders through mentor training in our library and teach your worship leaders that essentially they're small group leaders and mentors of their worship teams. It'll totally change the way your worship teams work. It'll infuse your worship teams with a discipleship culture in there. Mentoring can happen everywhere. In small groups, small group leaders should think about looking at people in their small group to help them to disciple, to mentor the people in the small group. So a mentor is to a small group leader what a small group leader is to a pastor, right? A mentor helps a small group leader organizationally, like a small group leader helps a pastor. So a small group leader can say, hey, I noticed that this person really could use some extra help. It seems like they're almost there or they need some help with this thing. Would you mind going to lunch with them? Would you mind mentoring them? And small group leaders, you can bring some of your next leaders in your small group, you can bring them through that mentor training series and then deploy them to be mentors in your small group. See, mentoring can totally revolutionize every single ministry in the church. And just like we said in the other lessons, pastors at church must be committed to marketing this idea. Just like parents being pastors and small group leaders being so important, small groups, pastors, you have to make sure that you market the idea that mentoring is a thing, that mentoring is important. You need to wave that flag. You need to create opportunities for it. You need to talk about it in your sermons. You need to talk about it in your announcements. You need to put stories of great mentoring relationships in front of people. You've got to get people in there to say, man, I need to get a mentor. I need someone to help out. You need to put on some mentor training for youth. You need to be a part of that. You need to make sure that whoever's running your youth is really building mentors. You need to make sure that if a parent comes to you and says, what do you have for my child, for my teenager, you need to say, we have great mentors. And you need to know that you do have great mentors. And you need to connect those parents and those kids to great mentors. That's part of your job. Market this thing. Get people connected in these mentoring relationships. And just like we said before, marketing this truth is going to frustrate everyone if you just market it, but you don't equip mentors. So make sure that you're also equipping mentors. We've got marriage mentor training. We've got regular mentor training. We've got youth mentor training. Make sure you're familiar with all those training modules and you know exactly how to use them and that they're being deployed simply in your ministry. And don't forget this last thing. Equip your mentors through a replicating, mentoring ministry, whether it's with worship or with youth or with small groups or whatever area of ministry that you're going to make sure mentoring starts to be infused into. Make sure that you equip them with a replicating ministry, which is you might train up the first mentors, the worship leaders, the key small group leaders, whatever, but eventually you need to make sure that you're using that simple reproducible tool, that mentor training tool, to empower them to say, you go ahead and raise up and train the next level of mentors. And the person you mentor, make sure that you teach them when they're ready, make sure that you teach them how to mentor the next level. And this is how you have a viral church. And this is how you have the infrastructure in place for discipleship to really be happening at your church. Parents, small groups, and mentors. It's really important for you to understand, pastors and ministry leaders, this will take time. Don't expect that you just, go through this series and say, okay, we got it, we're going to do it, it's going to be a piece of cake. It's going to take months and months. It might take years to really get this infrastructure in place. But trust me, if you put the time and effort into it to get this infrastructure in place and make sure that you focus on these three key areas, you will have what it takes to have a healthy, viral, revolutionary church. Now go ahead and download that workbook and talk about this with your leadership team. And don't forget to check out some of the other topics and series in our library.